Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm going to be starting a series where I take a look at some of the biggest free agency decisions across the entire NBA. Because believe it or not, even though we've obviously got the finals coming up in a few days and the NBA draft will be here relatively soon, as of this recording, we're only a little bit over a month away from the start of NBA free agency. And as many of you know, there are some big decisions that are going to have a huge impact on the league for the next couple of years with some free agents this summer, and I just want to go through and take a look at them one by one and give my thoughts on them. And today we're going to begin by looking at what's probably one of the most complicated free agency situations across the entire league this summer, and that is Kemba Walker. And in my opinion, he has 4 legit and viable options in free agency, teams that he could possibly sign with. So to start, I'm just going to go through each of those teams one by one and take a look at some of their pros and cons for Kemba Walker. And the first team I'm going to talk about is the LA Lakers. And obviously they have LeBron, which is a big plus, and Kemba's game should fit relatively well alongside LeBron in a kind of similar role to what Kyrie Irving played in Cleveland, as a really good on and off ball scorer, someone that can space the floor when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, and then can also score and create when he does have the ball in his hands. And this team, should they sign Kemba and then make some other moves, has a chance to give him his first real taste of actual playoff success and potentially championship contention. They could sign Kemba and then make a deal for potentially Anthony Davis or Bradley Beal or whoever they wanted to. They could even keep the young guys if they chose to. And whatever they do around LeBron and Kemba, should he choose to sign there, would automatically be a better situation from a team success standpoint than what he would be leaving in Charlotte. And again, would just give him his first real opportunity to have postseason success, which is something that I'm really hoping that he gets out of his free agency this summer, and I would hope would be a priority for him. Now, the issues are just like some of the other teams that I'm going to talk about. The Lakers can't offer as much money in free agency as the Hornets can, which is obviously an issue for a player that has been relatively underpaid for the last 4 years. You also have to consider the massive amount of organizational dysfunction that this team has apparently been going through over the last few years, with Magic Johnson formerly being in charge of the team, and then obviously Rob Pelinka still being there, whether it be their struggles with their head coaching search, some of Magic Johnson's tactics as a front office executive, now Rob Pelinka's tactics as a front office executive. There are apparently a lot of issues with the Lakers, and that can't be ignored. And then lastly, even though his game should mesh well with LeBron, I do think it's important to consider how he might adjust to playing alongside him, as well as just not being the main guy the way that he has been for the last 4 or so years in Charlotte. And I think that would just be an interesting adjustment, and maybe not even necessarily a con, just something in addition to consider if he thought about joining the Lakers. Moving on now, let's talk about the New York Knicks. Now, obviously, location is significant here because Kemba is from New York, and that I would imagine would be a big deal to him, being able to go back and play there. They also have the flexibility to bring in some stars and create a relatively good team depending on the moves that they make, just like the Lakers do. They have the ability to bring in Kemba and KD or Jimmy Butler or Kawhi or any of the other guys that I'm going to talk about in this series, and then turn around and also trade for Anthony Davis or Bradley Beal potentially, depending on how those trade talks go and how highly valued their assets are. Now, on the other hand, unlike the LA situation, Kemba would need to package his free agency with another star, because I don't think he would want to just go to New York and not have anybody else join him. Obviously, the Lakers already have LeBron, so even if they just signed Kemba and then rolled with the young guys, they're still going to be a good team with that group. Whereas if Kemba just signed in New York and then they signed some filler guys around him, they wouldn't necessarily be a good competing team right away without some other moves. So that's something to consider. And then again, just like with the Lakers, he might not necessarily be the guy if they do make the proper moves and bring in somebody like Kevin Durant, someone like Kawhi Leonard, someone like Jimmy Butler. That might be an adjustment for him. Now, one thing I do want to mention that's kind of combined for the Lakers and the Knicks is just that I don't necessarily think that Kemba Walker is going to be the first priority for either of those teams in free agency. They're going to have their eye on bigger targets like Kawhi, KD, Jimmy Butler, Kyrie, all of those guys first. And that probably is going to mean that Kemba, if he wants to sign there, is going to have to wait around to be a backup plan, which is kind of insulting for a player of his caliber. Or he could end up just being left out in the cold as a result of waiting around on some of these other players to make their decisions. So that would be a huge downside to either of these teams potentially bringing in Walker. There's no guarantee that he's going to just wait around for them to try and get other guys and then have him as a backup plan. Which brings me to a team that I've talked about a little bit in the past in connection with Kemba Walker's free agency, and that is the Dallas Mavericks, because he should absolutely be a priority for them in free agency, certainly much more so than New York and LA. It's well known that it's not all that likely that they're going to be able to bring in some of the bigger name guys that I've already talked about in this video, so Walker would be a really good option for them, and once again, a priority. On top of that, pending the Kristaps Porzingis extension and situation, the Mavs would be able to offer Kemba the full max and automatically have three really good players to build around with Porzingis, Walker, and then obviously Luka Doncic as well. On top of that, once again, he wouldn't have to wait around on any other stars or package his free agency along with another star to create a good team. So long as Porzingis comes back healthy and they sign him to an extension, those three players together should be able to create a really good team, a playoff caliber team in the West, and potentially a really good one depending on how those guys develop over the next handful of years. And again, that doesn't have to be tied to anybody else's free agency or, in addition, any other big trades to bring in another star, again, like they'd have to be in LA or New York. Now, the problems with this, first of all, is the Porzingis situation. There's a lot going on there in addition to just the fact that he's coming off of a serious injury, so there's no guarantee that he is going to come back and be the kind of player that he was prior to the injury. They also don't really have a ton of flexibility to bring in future pieces because they traded away draft picks to get Doncic and Porzingis, and if they were to sign Walker, then that would use up their cap space, so that would be an issue. And really, Walker would be depending on the development of these two young players, significantly younger than he is, to create a really good playoff caliber team. If those two guys don't develop properly, then Walker is still going to end up, carrying this team just like he has been in Charlotte. Not necessarily to the same extent, because worst case scenario, this team with those three guys should absolutely be better than the Hornets, even if they don't develop properly. But it is something to consider that Walker is counting on those two players continuing to develop and progress into all NBA caliber guys to really make this a true borderline, potentially championship caliber team. And last up now is the Charlotte Hornets. The first and extremely significant point here, obviously, is the fact that they can offer the most money, and I'm going to talk about the supermax possibilities later. Also, there's the fact that Kemba has built roots in Charlotte. It's been his home ever since he's come into the NBA. He has deep ties to the organization, and that would be a tough thing to leave. Now, the downsides are basically everything else. The Hornets are not in a very good situation to try and help Kemba win, and if this was a completely different scenario where the Hornets were not his original team, they wouldn't even be a consideration, but because of some other factors, they are. But unfortunately for them, and to a certain extent him, this team just has no flexibility to try and create a better team. They don't have cap space, they don't have young talent, they haven't really shown a great ability to draft well, and their ceiling moving forward for the next couple of years is probably the 6th seed in the East at best. And that's what makes this whole situation with Kemba Walker so interesting, because if the money was even, the Hornets wouldn't even be in the conversation. He would be gone, he would be going somewhere else, but it isn't. Because as we all know, Kemba made the All-NBA third team and is now eligible for a supermax extension that pays him $80 million more over the life of the contract than any other team can offer him outside of Charlotte. And in my opinion, if the Hornets were to offer Kemba Walker a supermax extension, that would almost guarantee them bringing him back. I don't see any possible way that he looks at the situations, even if it's a great situation in LA or New York or Dallas, I just don't see a way that you look at that and say, I'm going to turn down $80 million over the next 5 years. So that's the big variable here. If the Hornets offer the Supermax, I think Kemba is going to stay, but that's not the entire conversation with the Supermax, because there's two even bigger questions. Should they offer him the Supermax, and will they? Now, I think we can all agree that Kemba Walker is an outstanding player, an all-NBA caliber player, but he did just turn 29, so he probably has 2 to 3 years left max of being a borderline all-NBA caliber player, and the Supermax contract pays $44 million a year over 5 years, with the contract getting more expensive as Walker ages, which, as I plan on talking about in a future video here pretty soon, is a lot of money to pay to any one player, and there's probably only 6 or 7 players in the entire league that are even remotely close to being worth the Supermax extension, and Kemba Walker is not one of them. Now, if it were up to me, no, I would not offer Kemba Walker the Supermax, which probably means that he would end up signing elsewhere, but this team has little to no future with or without him on the roster anyway, in terms of being a high caliber team in the Eastern Conference, try and offload some contracts, get some young assets, and go from there. But I can also see why they would want to offer him the Supermax and try and bring him back, because like I said, that gives them a guarantee of bringing back an all-NBA caliber player, and that's something that they don't often get a chance to do in Charlotte. So in the end, my personal prediction would be that yes, Kemba Walker is going to stay in Charlotte. They're going to offer him the Supermax, with the caveat that if they don't offer it to him, any of those other three teams would be legit and real and very viable options and intriguing ones, because the difference in the amount of money that he can make between Charlotte and those other teams would decrease drastically if they don't offer him the Supermax, and maybe it will decrease enough for him to actually consider going to any of those teams and playing with LeBron next year, or playing in New York next year, or playing alongside Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. But there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, this is going to be a series where I want to be taking a look at a whole bunch of different players around the league and their free agency decisions. So if you have a player in mind that you'd like to see me cover, then be sure to leave that down in the comments section below. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you missed any of my previous ones, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.